Okay, so once again, just want to thank everyone for making time to come to the community meeting tonight. My name is Fred Wilkins, and I am the project manager for the Little Pimmit Run at Chesterbrook Road Stream Restoration Project for Fairfax County. Before I get started, I understand that Jane Edmondson from the supervisor's office is here. Jane, would you like to say a couple words first?
Sure, Fred. Thank you and welcome. By my count, I think there are about 50 of us who have decided to spend a winter evening. I'll tell you, I don't know about you, but I'm freezing to hear about this important project. I can attest that Fred and his crew have been working very, very hard on this stream restoration, which is really one of two that he's managing on Little Pimmit Run. The other one that will incorporate the Chesterbrook North Albemarle pipe project was the subject of a public meeting back in December. So I've seen the presentation. I'm anxious to see it again. I know it's a good one. And thank you again. We welcome any questions and comments. And Fred, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right, so
all participants are now in listen-only mode.
So screen 2. Okay, so kind of going over the agenda of what we're going to discuss tonight. I'm going to show you some vicinity maps, show you where the project is and where some of the nearby other projects are in relation to this project. And go over project goals and social goals, as well as some program drivers for the stormwater business line. And then some environmental benefits. And then we'll start to get into like plan related elements like typical structures. We'll walk through kind of the existing conditions, as well as like some construction examples. I know it's early in the design process, but it's good to always include some construction examples just so people know what's coming further down the pipeline. Then also some of the previously completed county projects, and then we'll really look into the design and some of the alignment alternatives, and then kind of where to go from there, where are the next steps. Then I will also have my contact information as part of the presentation with questions coming at the end. So kind of taking a real bird's eye view of the area, there's multiple improvement projects going on. So looking at the screen, the very first one I'm going to highlight is the yellow one that kind of runs from Franklin Park Road all the way to kind of where Kirby Road is next to the stream channel, which is the Little Pimmit Run at Chesterfork Road Stream Restoration. Then another one I want to highlight is the Little Pimmit Run Sewer Realignment Project, which is it's a realignment project that kind of looks at some of the stream crossings that goes throughout the reach of the stream restoration. And then, as people may have seen some work ongoing in the couple previous years, there was an emergency sanitary stabilization that occurred kind of just to the north of Chesterbrook Road. And then another nearby project is actually Fairfax County Department of Transportation sidewalk project. The earlier phase brought the sidewalk out to about Maddox Lane, with the next phase extending the sidewalk on the south side of Chesterbrook Road, going out to about 41st Street, where the Fairfax County meets Arlington County. And then there is another stream restoration project called the Little Pimmit Run Tributary at Woodland Terrace Stream Restoration. That has about another 1,000 feet of stream, that also includes improvements to the drainage system at the North Albemarle Street and Chesterbrook Road intersection. So kind of taking a closer look at the Chesterbrook Road stream restoration, there's two phases right now for the project. The first one goes from Franklin Park Road to Chesterbrook Road, and it parallels Solitaire Lane, Briar Ridge Court, as well as Chestervale. Phase 2 of the project kind of picks up again on the north side of Chesterbrook Road and goes all the way to where Kirby Road is right next to the stream channel. And that reach is about 4,500 feet long. So just looking at the project goals, is we want to restore the full length of Pimmit Run, which is about 7,000 feet. And we really want to look at kind of reducing sediment transport, because as is obvious in several locations, the water has a lot of energy and it's causing a lot of erosion. And you see this in like a bunch of the vertical raw banks that goes along the stream channel. But then another goal is to protect infrastructure. And there's multiple locations where we have sanitary pipes that cross the stream bed. And in some cases, the water can transport and move debris that can damage some of the sanitary crossings, as shown during the July 2019 storm, which caused like emergency repair to be needed. And then one of the big goals of every project is really just to maintain coordination with the stakeholders and the community. Ultimately, we want to give the community something that you can enjoy since you live next to the project. So social goals kind of just continues to drive home, the just interacting with the community, being transparent about what the county is doing or county's trying to do with the stream restorations, coordinate the stakeholders, because the project itself is on private property and it's on Park Authority property, Fairfax County Park Authority property. And so we have to work with each of the property owners on design that's on their property. And then we always want to build partnerships, local organizations such as HOAs. And on this project, we're also coordinating with Fairfax Trails and Streams, because there is a significant amount of trails that are on park property and some private property. And then just kind of go through the design team. Fairfax County Public Works is over stormwater. Stormwater is one of the 4 areas in the Fairfax County Public Works. Then we're also partnering with the Park Authority. And then the lead designer is Wetland Studies and Solutions. So stormwater is a business area. There are several different program drivers, and these are kind of like the largest ones. It's like Fairfax County has a municipal separate storm sewer permit. And what that means is we have our storm drain system separate from our sanitary system. And so with the EPA, the state gives Fairfax County a permit to discharge water from the storm sewer system into the Chesapeake Bay. And Chesapeake Bay has federal regulations on it. And it has a total maximum daily load, which is, it regulates the amount of pollutants that can go into the Chesapeake Bay. And Fairfax County is within the Chesapeake Bay drainage area. But the Chesapeake Bay total maximum daily load is not the only regulation that the county has to consider. There are local regulations as well. And some streams in Fairfax County are in bad shape, and there are local regulations to help improve the stream water quality. And then stormwater also is responsible for dams throughout the county. There's 20 state regulated dams that when there's a major storm, stormwater is out there monitoring the dams for safety. And then when we're not monitoring dams, there's also a pretty robust maintenance division that has to look at and maintain like several detention basins. There's over 1,300 that stormwater has to maintain, as well as several thousand miles of pipe throughout Fairfax County. And then there is also a public safety element to it. So like whenever there's a hurricane, tropical storm, or blizzard, there are functions that stormwater has to activate for. Like during a blizzard, stormwater keeps it keeps snow out of the dry, like the travel ways for like police stations and fire stations, so that the emergency vehicles can get from the actual station to the VDOT right away. VDOT clears the roads. Fairfax County's got to make sure that we can get from the station to the road. environmental benefits of stream restoration. Well, we really want to improve like the watershed conditions, and we want to look at it like holistically. So because of that, we're working kind of like from the headwater locations, which means we're working from further up in the watershed. Like instead of trying to improve the Potomac River itself, we're going to go upstream of the Potomac River and start fixing these smaller streams. And through that, we're looking at controlling the water velocity. If we control the water velocity, we can control all the energy that's in the water. If you have water that has high energy, it's going to be very erosive. It's going to threaten infrastructure, and it can also carry things like logs that would threaten infrastructure if it were to strike it. And we also want to protect vegetation, because vegetation is where we get a lot of our benefits from improving the condition of the soil and making it resistant to erosion. But it's not just looking at the water. We want to also look at the ecological aspect and improve the ecology. So we want to restore the riparian corridor, as well as in-stream habitat. One way we judge the health of our streams is by looking at the aquatic bugs that's in the stream. If you only have a couple types of aquatic bugs that are tolerant of most pollutions, then you may not have as high stream quality as you would if you had a dozen different bugs and a couple of them are known to be intolerant to pollution. So we also want to improve the ecology. So how do we restore streams? One of the common approaches we have is to use a cross vein. So the image right now we're seeing is a standard cross vein. What it is it's a V-shaped weir, effectively made out of stone. We'll have the low point of the weir kind of towards the middle of the stream channel. And then we'll have two arms, one on each side going into the bank, but they'll be going into a bank at an angle. So when we have like your normal sunny day flow when there's no rainstorm, the water will be crossing at the low point in the middle of the weir. But when you have like a storm, so you have higher flows, the width of the channel expands. And as a result, the water will go over the arms of the weir. But because the arms of the weir are at an angle and they are increasing in elevation, the only way the water can go over the weir, it directs it towards the inside of the channel where we have a pool. So the water is kind of putting its energy in the pool upon itself instead of into a bank and eroding the bank. So it really pulls stress off of the bank. This image right here shows a couple other of the typical structures. The one it's focusing on is the root wad, where when we do our stream restorations, we do inevitably take out some trees, but we try to maximize the amount of reefs out of those trees because we want them to stay in sight. We want to incorporate them into the design. And one method is a root wad. So we may use the top half of the tree as a log for a woody structure, and then take the lower half of the tree where you have the root ball and kind of stick it into a bank and use like the roots of the tree to effectively break up the energy of the water. And the root wads do a great job of this because the roots they zigzag in multiple directions, and it breaks up the water and causes the water to go in multiple directions. The second element that is shown in this picture is a stone toe. So we do what we can to pull stress off of the bank. And then we also, another method to protect the bank is to add a stone toe. Other typical structures we have include boulder clusters. And so when you have a straight run of stream, water can pick up speed depending on like what the slope of the riffle is. And so one technique that we use to kind of disrupt it and prevent the water from gaining too much velocity is to put boulder clusters or put randomly placed boulders into the stream. And what this does is it forces the water to have to redirect and go around it. So when you have multiple boulder clusters, it just keeps the water from going down a straight channel. Now the boulder clusters, they do provide us with other opportunities, depending on how we arrange them. Like in this photo, we have a stone weir that's at grade, so it's kind of hard to see to maintain like the stability of the channel, but right next to it, we add our boulder clusters, and when we put them at the same height and we put them relatively close to each other, it makes it passable. So if there's a trail, like in this picture, there's a trail, you can get from one bank to the other without having to get into the water. And this is at like a base flow condition when you don't have a storm. When you have a storm, the water level raises, it may cover the boulders, but then as soon as you get back down to a base flow condition, you'll be able to cross without getting wet. And the picture also shows like the top half of a tree. It's kind of in the background, and I just recently noticed it, but it shows a log sill. So another way that we use the trees that we take down on the project. So kind of shifting gears and looking at the existing bank. What do we have out there right now? And this picture is in phase one, kind of near the top half, where how the water in a lot of cases erodes the bank is it will remove the loose material kind of near the bottom of a bank. And so when you have a storm come, it removes some, next storm comes, it removes a little more. Then at some point, the water will have removed enough to where the soil that's on kind of like halfway up the bank, near the top of the bank, it has nothing to rest on. And as a result, you have soil that falls, it'll fall into the stream. Then the stream will go back to work doing the same thing, removing soils little bit by little bit until it hits either bedrock or something hard, which in this case is going to be a manhole. Then as we continue to walk downstream, this is one of the sanitary crossings that I had mentioned earlier. When we have sanitary crossings, when we install them, they usually have 2-3 feet of cover on top of them. Well, as the watershed to this stream develops and becomes more impervious and increases water flow especially during storm events. And as a result, it picks up a lot of energy and it removes a lot of material. And it will uncover sanitary pipes. But there are additional infrastructure that get threatened other than sanitary pipes. In the picture here, it's a concrete Fairweather crossing, where the one I had shown you earlier was made out of imbricated stone. This one was made out of concrete. And once the water removed enough material from beneath the concrete, it had nothing, it couldn't support itself adequately and it broke. And so this is one of the infrastructures that would be replaced. Now, as we continue to go down, we're on Park Authority at this point, just south of Chesterbrook Road. We're starting to really see vertical banks that are higher than what we saw earlier. And kind of like one thing that this picture shows is it shows the root masses of the trees on the bank. And we're starting to see all the roots that are supposed to be in soil. So as the water removed, especially when the water gets below the root mats, it'll remove the soil and it removes the foundation that the tree is resting on. So once enough of the soil has been removed, the tree will not be able to support itself and it will fall into the stream. So as we're starting to get into phase two, just on the north side of Chesterfork Road, still on Park Authority property at this point, we're seeing now some very steep vertical banks. And when I took this picture, it's a couple days after I had talked to the property owner who had called me out there with concern about this tree. The tree has fallen. So a lot of times a tree will try to respond to the changing condition and send roots into the bank, but the water is always going to remove the soil beneath the tree faster than the tree can respond. So a lot of times you'll see trees that are kind of out there into the stream channel that look like they've grown sideways out of the bank and then went up. Those are trees that are trying to adjust to the erosion. And then we come to another sanitary crossing here. where at this point the stream has eroded below the crossing. So another danger of, or another concern of when you have an aerial crossing is now you have something that's going to catch debris that floats down from upstream. As you get further down, this picture right here is a utility pole that the utility company had to come out, and they've had to add additional, or they attempted to add additional poles to try and stabilize it. And this right here is one of the guy wires that was originally in the ground. Like the guy wire for the pole is no longer even in the ground. So we are, when we have a concept, which is the next phase, now this is something that we go to utility companies and we share a design with, and we look for conflicts and for opportunities to protect infrastructure. So as we're going further downstream on phase 2, this is a picture of a tree that is still standing. We can see the vertical bank, it goes under the root mat. I'm surprised this tree is still standing given how much of the bank has been removed. But as erosion continues, this tree is going to inevitably fall. Then as we get further down, the infrastructure you see right now is it's the outlet to a storm basin that's kind of just on the other side of this berm right here. Like this is the outfall for it. And you can see 5 sections that were previously buried are now laying in the stream. And so this kind of shows like this entire bank, it does not have any of the larger vegetation on it that you would see in like a riparian area or forested area. And that's kind of where we get a lot of benefits for stabilizing the bank, is when you have tall trees, long grass, large bushes, you get a more fibrous root system that helps the soil resist erosion a lot longer. Most turf grasses only have a root system that goes down a few inches into the soil. So once the water is below the root mat for that grass, then it's going to start taking soil a lot faster than if it had any like the advanced vegetation on it. So here we're going to start kind of getting into the construction examples. This image right here shows a construction access road, but it shows several different things that I would want to point out. First being, it shows the orange fence that goes around the entire site. And this is a safety precaution because it calls attention and lets people know that there is construction site right here. We have wood planks that are on, and these access roads do go into forested areas, and they get close to both trees and sanitary infrastructure. So one thing that we definitely add is like plankings to the trees to help protect the tree trunks from construction equipment accidentally bumping into them. And then the timber mats themselves, they provide protection for both underground utilities and the tree root mats by spreading out the weight of the equipment. So instead of having like 2 tracks, the equipment weight gets spread out over a large 12x16 area. And beneath the timber mat itself is 12 inches of mulch to kind of cushion and protect the tree roots. So here's a construction example of what does it look like when we're actually physically constructing a stream restoration. We do have the big yellow equipment. This one, the picture is about to excavate and dig up a trench for one of the cross veins I'd shown you earlier. It's probably going to be about 5 feet deep because each cross vein has 2 courses of stone, and the stone is generally like 3 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. So like 2 courses of that, and it goes pretty deep into the ground to help protect and hold the grade of the channel. And further up, kind of in the background, you can see kind of the work that they've already done. And if you were to take a picture downstream, you'd probably see the eroded channel. So construction examples. We try to save as many trees when we actually do channel improvements. And depending on where the tree is, we may err on the side of caution and take the tree, or we may let the tree stay there, trying to keep it. It depends on what kind of improvement we're doing in the area of the tree. In this case, we went pretty close, right next to both trees, kind of weaved in between them. And you'll see like the trapezoidal channel, our trapezoidal shape in the channel, where we prefer to have like a nice slope that we can vegetate. And it provides good resistance to shear, or like not shear forces, but it provides good resistance to erosive flows of the water because it spreads the water out over a wider area. So kind of before and after examples, this is the Flat Lake Confluence project. Just added an arrow to identify like the trees. So kind of like use it as a marker. Like what used to be a vertical or near vertical bank that had no vegetation on it was now sloped back. Like we try to hit what we call a 3-to-1 slope, which means like for every vertical foot that we try and protect, or for every vertical foot that we go, like every vertical foot in elevation that we change, it's 3 feet horizontally. So it's a milder slope. Then this is the Banks Park project restoration. And again, we see that we weaved in between trees. But one thing that this picture shows well is kind of the vegetation taking hold. As in 4 years after the project was completed, plants that were 6 feet to 8 feet when they were installed are 12 feet to 14 feet, depending on species. And when we do our vegetation plan, we try and mix it in so that we have fast growing species, as well as some of the slower growing species that will get bigger over time. So kind of looking at the proposed design alignments. This is one that's currently up on the project website. And I guess just briefly going through the 3 different alignments. The first alignment kind of establishes a balance between using the existing channel while increasing the meandering or the curves in the proposed channel. Just because geometry is one way that we are able to kind of control some of the water velocity. If we can get it to have some more curves and some more meandering, that helps us control velocity. And then alignment number 2 is the one that kind of maximizes the curvature in the stream. And then alignment 3, which doesn't run throughout the entire project. It's predominantly only in phase 2. It maximizes using the existing channel. And then one thing I do want to point out is all 3 alignments uses the over-widened channel scar. And what I mean by that is, like right now we see vertical banks on both sides of the bank. But if you look at where the water actually is, it's only about 10 to 15 foot wide, flow path. But the vertical bank is closer to 30, 40 feet, depending on where you are on the channel. So kind of starting at Franklin Park Road, where I highlighted the vertical banks on each side. The 2 alignments, the solid black one is going to be the alignment number 1. The blue solid line is alignment number 2, as well as highlighting impacted trees. So as we come out from Franklin Park Road, there's not much change in each alignment. Like whenever we go under a culvert, those are fixed points. So any alignment that we implement has a cross under the road at that point. So once we get away from the culvert, we start to meander a little bit more. So we got some proposed channel alignments going down, this we call the S curve. Essentially, you have water making close to 180-degree curve, and then followed by almost another 180-degree curve. So it forms an S curve. And these meanders are tortuous, and the water is eating away at the outside, where we had to add some riprap to provide additional protection. So both proposed alignments, they remove those tortuous meanders, and they provide a smoother transition to get the water through the area. So we're now near the bottom of phase 1, just to the south of Chesterbrook Road on Park Authority property. And this is where we had the broken concrete Fairweather crossing. Again, we see the two different alignments. And this is something that the county is always looking for feedback from the community. And we want to know what the community likes as well. We want to take that into consideration. So this alignment, there's not much change in this. This one has 2 fixed points. It has the culvert that comes from under Chesterbrook Road at the start of phase 2, but also want to utilize the cross vein that was built as part of the emergency sanitary work that was completed a couple of years ago. And here's where we start to pick up alignment number 3. And you see the orange line, it follows the dashed brown line to the greatest degree between the 3 alignments. Again, with alignment 2, trying adding the most curvature in the stream channel. And then on phase 2, this is where we have an existing stream crossing for the trails. So one thing we're taking note of is kind of where all the trails are and how we're going to impact the trails. Because one thing we want to maintain is when the construction is completed is we want to provide the trails that were there beforehand. Like we're talking to Park Authority about the trails on Park Authority property. Then we're also looking at trails that are on private property. But trails is something that is closer to the front of our minds on this particular project. So as we're starting to get close to the end of the project, no, alignment 3 it stops at this part of the project, but alignments 1 and 2 continues to the very end. And it's the end of the project where both alignments have to sync up. So I know of all the people on the listening to the presentation, everyone lives at a different portion along the channel. So I am interested on your feedback and input on the different alignments. So schedule, looking at schedule, where do we see this going? What are the next steps? It's like right now we're having the pre-design channel alignment meeting. Coming out of this meeting, looking to kind of establish a single alignment option or a single alignment. Now, in order to establish this, or what I feels likely is we're going to take elements from each different alignment. Like if we go with alignment 1, we're not going to go with alignment 1 throughout the entire stream reach. Well, we may go with alignment 1 for a couple hundred feet and decide alignments 2 or 3 are more preferable in other sections of the reach. So it's not like we can only choose one and we have to stick with it. We can take from all 3 if we need to, but by the time we come to the concept, there will only be one channel alignment that we're proceeding with. And then the concept design, we're looking at September, this September for delivery. And then kind of once we have the concept, that's when we'll look at having another community meeting to show the community, like this is where we wound up after all the discussion. This is the channel alignment that we're proceeding with. And looking to have that November of 2021. And then kind of from that concept, that's when we'll start reaching out to the property owners, because we don't have land rights for every linear foot of stream. Like some of it's on park authority property, some of it is on private property in an easement, some of it is on private property, not an easement. And so that's kind of where we may spend some time, is talking to individual property owners. And then construction is really going to be determined on having a final design, which we first need to know what land rights we do have and where we have them in order to have a final design. So I'll just providing my contact information for anyone. So this presentation will be posted to the project website shortly after today's meeting or tonight's meeting. Then online resources, like there's Stormwater Plan Division, a link to the Stormwater Plan Division, a link to like Northern Virginia Soil Water Conservation District, and the watersheds. That's where a lot of our projects come from, is they're driven from projects that were previously identified in a watershed. And then also here's a link to the project website. And for that, we go to questions. All right, so
We do have some questions that have come up in the chat box. And if you'd like, I can read them to you.
where did my chat go? Okay. Show up chat box. Okay.
All right. I have a first question about, is there a plan to replace eroded materials from under trees on the stream banks? So I guess a question about what treatment's being done to the eroded stream.
The plan to replace eroded materials from under trees. I think that's going to come down to the individual tree itself, because some trees and what we're doing in there, what we're doing in the area with the alignment. Because if we are cutting, or if we're cutting into the banks or grading into the bank, I don't think we'd end up being able to protect the trees. But if we're filling in the area, it's a possibility to pack some soil or rock under the tree to stabilize it.
Okay. Next question is, where a number of trees are affected or there is a major change in the alignment, will the area that is not, whoops, my screen just changed, so I lost where I was. Oh yes, here we go. So where a number of trees are affected or there was a major change in the alignment, will the area that is not stream bed anymore be filled in or graded to build up the bank?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to find you. Okay, what question are you on? What number of trees?
Yeah.
Where number of trees are affected, there is a major change in alignment. Will the area that is not stream bed be filled and graded to build up the bank?
Right. So as you're moving the stream, how do you reset the topography, I guess?
All right, so that one I'm going to ask WSI to help provide an answer. JT, Nathan, are you guys on?
Hey, hi, I'm JT Kelly with Wetland Studies. I also have Nathan Staley on with us tonight, just in case we started to get into some of these more design-specific questions. I'm gonna let Nate handle most of these, but this one's pretty straightforward, and the answer is yes. What we'll do is it'll be a flip-flop of the dirt. So if we do realign a stream, you take the excavated material and use that to refill the portion of the stream that you're abandoning. It all depends on what the final grading works out to be. Sometimes we don't completely refill it back up. We'll leave it low and plant that as a wetland or some other habitat feature. We can use those kinds of areas in order to help balance out cut and fill, either reduce the use of material to save for use later, or fill them up a little more if we're trying to get rid of some material to try and balance out the earthwork. Does that answer that question?
We have another tree question. Are the impacted trees going to be taken down?
Hold on, I guess before we get to that question, there's a couple I wanted to answer that were above the last one. Where the question is, are we trying to preserve the stream? Or are they trying to fill it in? So we're trying to preserve and stabilize it where we can. And then kind of, as JT just mentioned, fill it in where we are abandoning sections of the stream. And those sections are like where it's really meandered and is on private property where we want to pull the stream back so that the middle of the stream is in the middle of the corridor.
Okay.
And
Any,
going-
all right. How involved, you addressed this towards the later part of your presentation, Fred. Perhaps you can talk a little bit more about how involved are the owners in the alignment selection process for the portions of their property?
They are involved as much, I guess, as much as they want to be. Like yeah, if they choose, if I don't hear from them, then we'll try and choose based off the best for stability. But if I hear from them, that their input gets taken into account. And going back up to the impacted trees, yeah, the impacted trees, the ones with little red X's, those ones are currently shown to be removed. But like all the little red X's that you saw throughout the alignment, that's not indicative of what's actually going to occur. Because right now we showed little red X's for all 3 alignments. So what is shown to be removed at the pre-design is not necessarily what's going to actually be removed during construction once we settle on one alignment instead of showing the removal for all 3.
Right. We only take the trees that we need to, and those decisions are made based on a need for a certain channel alignment, an evaluation of the health of a particular tree, sort of where it stands. I think I remember seeing one about the replacing eroded materials from under the trees. In many cases, if the tree's already been eroded underneath, its health it's not going to survive long anyway. So even if we were to put it back together, in most cases, when you've completely undercut into the structural roots of a tree, they're not going to survive anyway. So we would take them down and lay the bank back. But the decision on trees comes down to a combination of the health of the tree, where the alignment really needs to go, and can we avoid it? And what Fred and the county and the community are looking at with respect to certain trees or stands of trees.
Great.
I'll point out one thing about the trees, and that is that when you walk along the stream through the corridor now, you may see these little silver tags on the trees with a number on it. That's because we've walked through and we've survey located, and as JT talked about, we've taken this, what's the size of that tree, what's the species of the tree, what's the condition, is it doing pretty well health-wise, and it would be resilient to some of the disturbance around it. That also depends on the species. Or is it in rough shape where any disturbance around that tree is really going to send it down a path in terms of its health that's going to be a liability. And the other reason I wanted to point out those tree tags is because when you're looking at these plans, and there were some questions about, what opportunity will you have to sort of interact with the design. When you look at these plan sheets, we try to have those tree tag numbers as legible as we can. So when you walk out on your property, you can say, okay, this is where I am on this plan sheet, because I can look at a tree and I can see that tree tag and I can track that location on the sheets of the plan.
Thank you, Nate.
We had a question about, can the WSSI study be made available in its entirety?
Yes. Yeah, that's something that we made available. Write that down.
Will that be on the website or distributed to people via email?
Right now, I think, because right now it is a fairly hefty sized plan set, so I don't know if the website can hold it. So it might be on an individual basis where someone sends me an email and I send them a link to somewhere they can get to it.
All right. And I can put your email in the chat box. Someone asked to put the project website in the chat box. It has been placed in there. Thank you, Susie, for doing that. Participant asked, when will we know exactly how our property is impacted or not?
The next submission will have a single channel alignment, and from there we would know what the impacts are for the stream restoration. So like if the stream right now, if one of the alignments is close to your property right now, go ahead and let me know your thoughts, and we'll do our best to accommodate.
Fred, on that that coordination piece, is there, do you think there's a plan for, I mean, I know we're still sort of limited in terms of face-to-face interaction at this point, but moving forward, do you see an opportunity for like an on-site stream walk scenario?
Yes. All right. So once we get to the concept phase, you are going to see additional surveyors in the field, because one thing that we want to do, aside from just look at the plans on a set of paper, is we want to get a good visual of what impacts are going to be. So once we get the next submission, WCI surveyors can go back into the field, and they're going to flag the channel alignment and like the tree impacts, and something that we can walk the whole length of the stream and like get a visual in person, like for eyes, see what the impacts are going to be. And from there we can tell, it's like, well, we're really too close to this tree or that tree, or we want to move it and just shift the alignment here, and it looks possible. And so yeah, there is definitely another opportunity to look at exactly where the channel is going to go.
Yeah, and part, I would just say that part of that process is we're evaluating, because we're almost to another question. Maybe I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but you know, in that evaluation process and looking at the tree impacts, that's you know, the county urban foresters, we've got certified arborists, the surveyors on our staff, we've got certified arborists, and others that are involved that would kind of be involved in the construction side, that are evaluating the you know, the feasibility of saving a specific tree. So we do get to that level eventually where, you know, as Fred said earlier, like, are we able to kind of fill around the tree, or is it just, you know, not really feasible to think that we can save a particular tree?
Great. I think we've talked about this a little bit, but what factors will determine which alignments will be chosen?
That is a complicated question.
Yes.
But I'll do my best to touch on as many of those elements as we can. And, you know, the other thing that I'll say when it comes to alignment is when we're talking about on a particular property, the alignment on one property can't be taken in isolation because the stream is large enough that we're not able to shift things on one property without affecting the upstream and downstream property. So you do have to look at it on a little bit of a larger lens. But you know, we can look at those different factors, and the factors that we're considering in the alignment are the tree resources. That's why I've got them survey located. The sanitary infrastructure plays into that. Any of the other infrastructure that may be out there, communications. Fred showed the picture of the telephone pole that's not doing so well. Any of the trails that are out there and the crossings. And you know, the stability of the channel is part of that too. So if we've got some really tight meander geometry, and Fred showed the pictures of that S bend, the geometry is just too tight to be sustainable. We know that there would be continued erosion there. So part of the design process is looking at the severity of the bends and saying, okay, we want to create sinuosity or curvature in the system, because that curvature, it's, you know, it's like a curvy road. You can only drive so fast. The same thing for the water. So we want the curvature, but we can only sustain a certain amount of that. So I think I caught most of them. JT or Fred, you can jump in and add anything to that, but there's a lot of factors going into the alignment.
Yeah, then also just want to add feedback from property owners.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you get specific feedback that you wouldn't necessarily know, because, you know, as a resident, you have a certain perspective, and you have the history of the property too. And those things certainly go into it.
Right. The next question also deals with alternatives. And how do you monetize the alternatives using a cost-benefit assessment? If so, which appears to have the best cost-benefit ratio?
We don't look at. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Fred.
I was saying right now, since we don't have an alignment determined, we don't have a value right now to put on it, because alignment 1 is not going to cost the same as alignment 2, and so we don't have a cost yet. So we'll get an estimate with the concept, which would have a single alignment. And then also to feed off that, one of the benefits that we look for from stream restoration is like reduced nutrients to Chesapeake Bay, which in order to know how much nutrients are we reducing, we need to know the alignment to know exactly how many linear feet we're stabilizing. So that question, we have a much better grasp of the answer at the concept level once we get there.
Yeah, I will say there's there's some differences in terms of cut and fill, and that dirt moving is part of the costs. Also, the curvature of the stream, if it's a curvier system, then it's going to require more of those cross veins potentially, and each of those have a cost. So you can start to look at the differences in the costs, but some of the benefits are hard to quantify. And I'll give the example of, these natural systems tend to have a higher sinuosity than what we're able to achieve in an urban system. So we want to try to drive as much of that sinuosity as we can given the constraints of a particular site. So there tends to be an upper limit, but it's hard to put a monetary value or a benefit on the ecological side of it. It's much easier to do it when it comes to, well, how many trees do you have to take down? Because that's a cost. How much dirt do you have to move, and how many structures are there?
Thank you, Nate.
All right, next couple of questions are related to the walking paths. Are there any plans for a walking or bike bridge where the trail crosses the creek?
Right now, unless a property owner wants to install a bridge, we're looking primarily at the Fairweather crossings, because when you install like bridges, you have to have a responsible party for the maintenance of it.
All right. And then, excuse me, thanks for the presentation, Fred. Can you explain where the walking paths might be? Our home is at Chesterbrook Vale Court. Have you gotten into those details yet?
Yeah, so right now, couldn't break down exactly where any of the walking paths would be until we know which alignment is going to be moving forward. So with the concept coming, which is the next design submission, which will have the single alignment for the channel, based off the alignment, we will be able to determine like where the paths would go.
Okay. Has Arlington County upstream finished their work on Little Pimmit Run, and how will that impact this work?
I do not know. I have not had any contact with Arlington County, but right now, what we assumed are, as we develop the design, we try to take into account kind of like the future development of the area. So try to kind of get an idea of, based off like the county comp plan, what the impervious area is going to be in the future, and we try and size the channel to accommodate the future flow instead of what we have right now.
Okay. Is the design using base or average water flow or peak flow?
I will get into that. So there's, we're looking at, what does the base flow look like in terms of the, Fred talked about the Fairweather crossings. the stream ecology, the base flow factors into that. But when you look at the erosion and the stability of the system, that's a higher flow event. So a storm flow, and that would be, sometimes you'll hear the term a bankful event. And that's the event, if the system is kind of a natural system, then a bankful event is the one that kind of starts to spill out into the floodplain. And that's good, that's a natural process, and spreading out into the floodplain helps dissipate the energy and allows that riparian corridor and all the vegetation, to cause the benefits in terms of nutrient uptake, things like that, and kind of slowing down the flow. So we're looking at the full range of flows, the base flow conditions, the bankful conditions, which is like a 1-year storm, all the way up to the 100-year storm, because we've got to evaluate in the design process, how are we impacting that 100-year floodplain to know that we're not causing any issues, and kind of working within the context of that current floodplain. So it's the full range of flows that are going into the design.
Okay. What is the restoration criteria your agency complies to restore the disrupted landscape?
All right, so within, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we're getting at this idea of natural channel stream design, I think is what's being asked there, which is the idea that you use through the study of natural systems, undisturbed systems, you can look at the characteristics of a system that is similar in nature to what we're looking at on Little Pimmit Run. And you can use those different characteristics of a natural system of this character to rebuild and redesign and create a channel that will have long-term stability with the current watershed conditions that we're dealing with.
I think also, Fred, if you want to talk about the vegetation monitoring that occurs, given the restoration of that area as well.
So like a large component of Fairfax County stream restoration projects is a robust vegetation landscaping plan where we have to follow say it's the Chesapeake Bay ordinance that requires us to plant densely, like for every acre we disturb, we plant 100 overstory trees, 200 understory trees, and then 1,350 shrubs. And then, well, we don't just like install them and walk away. Like we end up monitoring because the vegetation is a key component in determining the success of a restoration. So we'll monitor for years after construction is complete.
Okay, see, when you talked about upstream work, did you mean upstream from the phase 1 site or just upstream of some of the specific issues?
The latter, or like if we were talking about a picture, upstream is upstream of that point.
Okay. How will the design and timing of this project be affected by the sewer work that needs to precede it? I guess a coordination question.
Yes, so one thing that we are trying to put a lot of emphasis on is working with the sanitary realignment design team, because the goal is to try and get the construction phases of both to line up as close as possible. That way we really limit the impact to the community. Ideally, we only want to be in there at one time, disrupt the community one time, and then have both projects be complete.
And a request, if you will meet with individual homeowners to walk these proposals through. It's hard to see from these small maps.
Yeah, I mean, I've been out there a couple times and walked with a couple different property owners. So I'm more than happy to meet with a property owner.
And the presentation with the maps that will be available, so you can download them and enlarge them on your screen as well too.
Fred, how would we schedule a walkthrough with you?
Send me an email.
Perfect. And then are there fences that are going to be taken down in this, and will they be replaced by the county? What's that situation like?
Well, once we know where the final alignment is, then we would know if the fence would need to be removed. But if we do remove a fence, we would restore the fence back.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Right. A question about vegetation. Over the years since 1975, I've seen a great deal of lost woodland, say 20 feet due to erosion. Will this lost land be restored? Will the land be extended?
It depends on what section of the channel that we are going to be in, because one thing we have to be careful not to do is whatever change we do, we will have to essentially model it and make sure that we are not raising the floodplain, because we cannot put water, we can't make the matter worse in terms of looking at those high intensity storm flows and what the water surface elevation is going to be. So I can't say that we would restore all the land. I'd say we definitely stabilize it, but I don't know that we'd be able to restore all the land, just because the stream has reacted to the drainage area as it has developed. And so what the stream channel looked like years ago, we couldn't restore it to that state today and have it be stable.
Will the project involve both planting native plants and removal of non-native invasive plants?
Yes, definitely. Yes. So before we do plantings, we really go after the non-native invasive plants, because if we do not, then they will very easily choke out the plants that we do install.
And any that are installed as part of this effort will be named.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fred, can you let us know what the different colors of flags or ribbons indicate?
Do our best on that. So you're probably seeing some orange, which is kind of like the blaze orange, and that is likely associated with delineation boundaries. So that is the jurisdictional boundary of the stream or the water feature. There are also some wetland pockets throughout this corridor. So there may be some flagging associated with those as well. There may be some pink flagging out there. I'm not exactly sure how they would be using that pink flagging. So I think I'm going to have to get back to Fred on this question to really give a good answer after talking to our surveyors and making sure I'm getting it right for this reach. I will note that I think, and Fred, you can correct me, but in talking about as we move forward, typically we've been wrapping the trees that would be impacted once we sort of dial in the alignment, and we have a better feel for which trees might be impacted. We're wrapping those in blue, aren't we? To indicate that those trees would be the ones that would need to be taken down to allow the grading work.
To my knowledge, that is what we've used the last few times. I think it might come down to whatever color flagging the survey team has available at the time they're doing the work.
Possibly, yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's probably, I'd say, like, if you see a new flagging out there, that would be the time to ask, because then I'd be able to kind of ask a question of, hey, there's this new flagging here and it's this color. Can you tell me what it's for? That way people don't get confused with flagging that may have been there from the first time the surveyor came through and was just flagging the tree to identify that he picked it up and assessed it.
So they are color coded and they do serve a purpose.
They do. I mean, orange, I think orange may be the predominant color and it may have a few different uses. But like I say, I'll get back to Fred with more of an answer on the different colors that they may see out there.
Right. I believe this question was addressed about Little Pimmit Stream Valley is overtaken with invasives. Would the project remove those so they don't overtake native plants that are incorporated into the design? I believe you answered that as there's a concerted effort to do that at the beginning of the project and then monitor.
There's a concerted effort, yes, to do it. I guess where it kind of becomes tough decision is this, like this question says that the entire park is kind of taken over invasive plants. And so when like we definitely clear the non-native invasives within the LOD, and depending on what like where we are on the project, there's sometimes we're able to go past the LOD, but I just didn't want to say that we'll end up clearing the entire park.
Good point. Good point. There is an area that you work within and an area that you don't. Okay. A question about the channel alignment slides show a gray path that more or less parallels the stream. Is this a sewer or something else?
I believe that gray hatch, if I'm interpreting this correctly, that's just a first cut at a possible alignment path. So a temporary access road. So, as we're laying that out, we're trying to, sort of similar to the channel alignment, avoid any trees whenever possible. A lot of times we'll use the sanitary sewer alignment because it really shouldn't have any trees growing in it anyway. So as long as we've got enough depth over the sanitary line that we're not fearful of running construction traffic on that, then we can use the alignment for the access road and just avoid manholes. So that gray hatch is, I believe, the access road, a first cut at the access road.
Will impacted trees be replanted? Also, it sounds like we are filling in parts of the stream so that the stream will no longer be a continuous flow of water. Is that correct?
No, I don't think that last piece there. There's, Fred touched on the number of plantings that go back in. So, yeah, typically there's tree impacts, and then there's a couple orders of magnitude greater number of trees that go back in. Albeit there's smaller trees because, for one, trying to plant large trees in a system like this where you've got flowing water is problematic because the floods can take out those large trees. So you're better off with smaller trees that can kind of bend and flex and then pop back up. And they're better able to sort of get established in these scenarios. But that second part of the question, filling in areas of the stream so it's not continuous flow. I would say no. It's actually more kind of creating a continuous, consistent cross section to some degree, so that we don't have those kind of constrictions and eddies and turbulence created with this necking down and expansion and contraction.
How will the revised channel profile change the impact of a big storm like the July 2019 one?
So that's where we have to really look carefully at the different flows and assess, what was this channel still eroding. And, once it erodes down to a certain elevation and it hits bedrock or some sort of resistant material, then it starts to widen. And we're starting to see that widening process in a lot of areas of this channel. Fred kind of talked about, the water might be 15 feet wide, but the top of banks is 40 feet wide. So we've started that widening process. So what we in the design look at is, okay, well, the floodplain boundary is at a certain location on the property. We can bring the channel back up and we can reestablish that floodplain connection to some degree. And we want to do that as much as possible, but we want to do that in the context of not causing flooding issues and staying within those kind of mapped floodplain boundaries. So that we're not causing issues on any given property. So it's a balance of assessing the flooding side of things, but trying to allow flow to utilize the full width of the riparian corridor in a stable way.
And I noticed that when I first sent out Fred's email, embarrassingly, I had a typo in it, even though I email him 10 times a day. So I did re-enter in Fred's correct email. My apologies. It's INS at the end. So just if you want to scroll through the chat to find that. And it's also on the project website as well. My apologies. I'm red in the face right now. How do you address major changes in the topography that can happen during the time of the project between planning and construction?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, Fred pointed to the tree that there was the landowner was concerned. The tree was still standing. A few days later, he went out and the tree's gone. Well, not gone. It's laying down in the stream. And then you get more big storms after that, and that area is going to change pretty dramatically and pretty quickly. So, you know, our surveyors went out, they surveyed, we have topo, and it's a snapshot in time, and things do evolve. Certainly by the time we get to construction, you know, probably a couple years later. So the necessity of the contract documents is that they sort of outline a scenario where the contractor, you know, we have a pretty good feel for, you know, what cut fill looks like, and we're showing them what the existing contours were at the time of survey. But we say, you know, there could be differences here, and it's on the contractor to kind of make up those differences and address those as part of the construction effort, because we're not able to quantify those, you know, immediately upon notice to proceed for construction. So it's a good question.
And then also I want to throw out there, like during periods where like there is long periods between the design and construction, we've in the past have gone back and had to resurvey in order to update the survey.
Yeah, that's somewhat
It's not
the typical scenario.
Yeah, it's not typical, but like if a project does get caught in design, sometimes it is necessary.
Right.
Okay. Is the project funded for construction?
Right now, the immediate answer is no, because the project, we have projected dates of when the project will go to construction, and it's paid for out of the budgets for those future years. So the way it works with like construction is, if I say this is going to go to construction in 4 years' time, we will plan for like the construction amount for that budget. But if the project isn't ready for construction when we forecast it, then the money that we would have been planning for would go to another project, and the project would get rolled over to the next year. But when we do designs on stream restorations, we fully intend to build them.
Can you discuss the plan for easements once a plan is finalized?
You discuss the plan for easements. I guess I'm trying to understand what the question is asking.
I think, is this getting at like when are the easements? When is that coordination on the easements in terms of the design process? Maybe I'm misinterpreting, but
So we get
that's correct. And then also, yeah, like what the timeline is for the easements.
So for the next submission, which has the concept and the single alignment, that's when I'd start reaching out and talking to the property owners about potential easements, because at that point I would know kind of what easement I would need. And then once all the easements have been granted to the county, then we would continue with the design. But the concept is kind of the stopping point until we have land rights.
Fred, there's a question and a comment that we appreciate the meeting and your overall effort. How can you move it faster? So maybe just talk about the project timeline and process.
So hoping we can move it faster. We're going to move as fast as we can, but a couple of things that we're kind of want to make sure that we want to do is make sure that we're moving at a speed that, you know, we can accommodate the sanitary realignment project as well. Because if we, you know, finish this thing tomorrow, then and we've left them in the dust, then we're disturbing the community twice, which we really don't want to do. So we're kind of working with a couple other projects just to make sure to try and limit the disruption to the community.
This question is about, I guess, a feature on the project site. What are the project prospects of combining this project with creating a natural surface trail from Chesterbrook Road to the big stones off Maddox Lane? This would include a ford like the picture you showed earlier in the briefing.
All right, so kind of like this prospects will come down to the property owners that now we'll have to discuss individually. This we'll talk to the park authority staff where the trail is on park authority property. Then we'll have to talk to private property owners where a potential trail would be on private property. So that one's kind of tough to answer right now, A, because we don't have a design, and B, because that involves a lot of coordination with, I guess, private property owners.
Okay.
I just couldn't guarantee what that would look like right now.
I'm just going to pair in the interest of time, since there are a number of questions. I'll just paraphrase this one. Fred, in a restoration project that happened about 15 years ago, it held up well for a while, but has failed in multiple areas. Why is this fix better than the last one?
It's hard to speak to a prior design like that without knowing the ins and outs. Again, hard to say what the failure mechanisms were there. In this case, a project like this, 7,100 linear feet, it gives us a huge chunk of the stream valley that we can look holistically at the issue. The watershed's developing, or it's largely developed at this point. So we're able to, take a good hard look at, what flows we anticipate from the different storm events. And we've got enough length of the valley that we're working with that we can make alignment adjustments. We can really look at it in a holistic way that we can create long-term stability with this construction effort. When you're looking at little pieces, like I think what this is alluding to, or maybe this was a few hundred feet that were dealt with, you're not able to make the adjustments because you're tied to an elevation at the upstream and downstream end of that section. And you can't change those because that's at say a property line or it's at a culvert. In this case, we have enough latitude that we can make full scale adjustments to gain that long-term stability.
Okay. What about the feeder stream that's been hugely affected by the construction project? Diggs, I think, that continues to pollute by pouring runoff into Little Pimmit at the stream crossing at end of Solitaire.
There are a number of tributaries that the restoration project would deal with, kind of the tie-in as those tributaries come into the main, the main valley of Little Pimmit Run. And I think I know that part we're talking about there with the ongoing construction, and we'll be able to kind of handle the part where it ties into the stream. But we're not going to be able to chase that up too far into that property.
Yeah, we'll be able to make sure that it would tie in a stable manner to the stream, but we can't control what he's doing on further up on his property, unfortunately.
We have an enormous problem on the hardwood lane side of the stream with invasive bamboo. It currently follows the trail where it crosses from Maddox Road and is expanding several yards. Is the county planning to do anything about that? Is that within the limits of disturbance, or you'll have to check?
Yeah, I think we'd have to look at that specific area and how it, once we have the, a single alignment that we're working from, and, how that falls within the limits of clearing. I know, Fred and I have worked on projects in other parts of the county that had a similar issue with bamboo. So we were able to incorporate the area into the plan and kind of mine that soil out, but then you have to be really careful because you want to make sure that that soil is being removed. Otherwise, you're just going to move that problem somewhere else, removed and disposed of properly, so that you don't just, put that issue somewhere else that you don't want it.
And then,
But
the county definitely goes after bamboo because that's one of the most aggressive non-native species that we encounter. And we realize that if we can't take out just half a bamboo stand, so if it's outside the LOD, very good chance of me approaching the property owner to ask to see if they are open to the county removing the entire stand.
A couple of quick questions here. Did you find any relics, I'm assuming artifacts, during the pre-surveys? And then when will the entire project be completed?
So on the archaeological side, I don't believe there were any major resources that would, pose significant constraints to the stream design. I'll have to confirm that, but I believe that's the case.
And then regarding the entire project schedule, right now, I don't have a date for that because I am not certain how long it would take to acquire land rights. And that's generally like the biggest unknown. Since given the length of the stream, I will have to be working with several different property owners.
Are there plans to enclose the open ditch for stormwater runoff along the trail where it crosses the creek off Maddox Lane?
Generally speaking, these projects, we are trying to avoid putting streams in pipes. We prefer to have them as open channel systems that are, designed in a stable form that we can let that vegetation and that vegetative reestablishment in the riparian buffer, interact with the stream system.
Have you been on site to see flows during a major storm?
I have not been out there during any of the larger storms, but I have had a few residents send me some video files from the larger storms of the past 5 years. And I'm grateful for that because it does show us how the flows are kind of working when you have more than just like a bankful event.
Fred, thank you for holding this meeting. We're excited to see this project move forward. Any chance the restored stream will be stocked?
So stock, I think the ultimate answer is no, but on several other of the larger stream projects we have done some, I guess, like we will have, fish come in and we'll have like fishing events. But aside from like those intentional like public outreach efforts, the fish that you would see in the stream would be ones that migrate from upstream or downstream naturally.
Right. Can you explain how the different alignments are marked on those concept plans that you shared tonight? The blue, orange, different coloring.
Yes.
Yeah, do we pull that back up?
Let me find that.
And I think, this is the questions asking about the existing alignment. And I think the topo is shown there, isn't it, Fred? It's just, it's fairly light. So you have to know what you're looking for.
All right, so I brought back up like the different channel alignments. And I what you see, like the three lines, the black, the blue, and the orange, those are center lines. I realized the one I put up on the project website, the older version, was difficult to read. So I tried simplifying it by saying instead of marking the edges of the stream, I'll just put one line and call it the center of the stream, or the center of the proposed alignment.
And you actually did highlight with that brown dashed, that's the delineated kind of top of bank of the existing stream. So that's the existing.
Yes.
Right. Okay,
So now-
hopefully that clears it up.
But I have a question. If that's the center, then how far does the bank extend on each side? Does it still stay within the current brown dashed lines?
No, it would extend outside the current banks right now, depending on where it is.
Right. Yeah.
So, like-
when you look at this, this particular graphic or sheet, if you look at the solid black line, which is alignment 1, alignment 1 has sort of a rough approximation of the channel width. At this point, very early in the design process, the estimate of the channel width. So that gives you a feel for like where the left and right bank points would be relative to that center line, that black center line. Or so you would apply that same width to the blue or the orange line to give you what the extent of the full channel width is.
Let's see if we can get through these questions. We've about 5 minutes left. When construction begins, is it done in stages? And if so, how big are the sections and how long do the stages typically last?
All right, so I think overall that is this one does happen in stages. Right now we have it broken down into 2 phases, with phase 1 going first and phase 2 going to construction second. But the duration of how long construction will last will really come down to how many structures we need to stabilize the stream channel. Like the fewer structures, the faster construction would go. But if we have several of the stone structures, that would slow down a contractor.
Okay. What are you using for the 100-year flood line? Essentially, what information do you use to establish that?
Yeah, so that is a county mapped boundary, which is based on, it's only updated every so often. And so that information is, somewhat dated at this point. But that is that sets that boundary. We then take the 100-year flow and run a model with the existing channel alignment and see what that boundary looks like. And then we basically do like a pre and post evaluation of the 100-year flow so that we know we're not increasing it beyond the existing conditions. But in terms of just the corridor that is marked and restricted from a land use standpoint at this point, that's that county map boundary that you're seeing on the plans.
So to be clear, none of your work could change or impact the boundaries of the 100-year floodplain, is that right?
That would require an easement. So that would require a specific conversation with the property owner and an easement to allow a shift in that boundary. So I think the simple answer is that we are designing to avoid that situation. I don't want to say with absolute certainty that there might be areas where we can't avoid it. Generally speaking, we're looking to avoid that situation.
I believe that answered the following question, just about will the 100-year flood line be resurveyed and revised as part of the design?
That actually, Fred, that's maybe I'll let you address. Typically speaking, we do the pre and post, but we don't revise the floodplain line, like a full floodplain study. That's a pretty significant effort in its own right.
Right, so we use the FEMA floodplain just to make sure that we keep our 100-year floodplain below theirs, because once we start changing FEMA's floodplain, that does require a significant effort to get FEMA to revise it.
Right. So there's the county 100-year floodplain and then FEMA, and correct?
Yeah, there's the county has a floodplain, which will typically start once you hit 70 acres, I believe, from the top of my head. But in FEMA floodplain, generally doesn't start until a much larger drainage area.
Correct.
Okay. We have many additional questions. Fred, how would you like to wrap up or finish these questions? How would you like to move along?
All right, so we informed people 8:30. I guess my thought is, why isn't that showing up on mine? I go another 10 minutes, but I think if we don't get to your question, then I would advise you to just email me your question. That way I continue to at least respond as I receive them.
So yeah, I'm trying to do my best to look through it. And the one that I'm seeing that we haven't necessarily addressed is the sewer relocation plan. Is it available on the county website? That project has not gotten to the point that there's Fred, you can expound on that, but it's earlier stage than what we have on the stream side. So there's not really anything there yet.
Fred, would you mind if I say something real quick?
Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name is Susie Harding. I'm the project manager for the sewer relocation project. And many of you will be receiving your first letters from me in the next few days. Our project is just getting started. So we'll be doing some preliminary site visits in the next few weeks. And we'll be having public meetings similar to this one in the not too distant future.
Thank you, Susie.
Okay. Let's see. In regards to the natural surface trail, are you planning that we will still have a trail like we do now?
So right now, where our construction would impact the trail, we would maintain that trail such that after construction is done, that trail is still there. So at a minimum, it's maintaining like the current trail connections post-construction.
Okay.
Like the trail may be in a new location, but I'm not going to take out a trail and not give you something back.
Okay. There is a participant who's very interested in the county taking care of the bamboo that is on their property. I believe you spoke to the point of where there is bamboo that you may reach out to property owners as it impacts the project reestablishment. Is that correct, Fred?
That is correct. Because that bamboo grows much faster than a lot of the native plants does. So bamboo is very good at choking out what we install in terms of our landscaping plan.
Okay. Participant just appreciated the communication on this project and has found it very worthwhile. So thank you. Is the light gray the plank road for construction? I believe Nate, you
Yes.
were confirming that.
Yes, yeah, that is those deck mats that we had the picture of with the orange fencing on the sides and the tree planking. Yes.
Okay.
That's a preliminary look at that, though. I mean, that is not to say that access road location won't be informed by design changes and or citizen feedback.
Okay. Fred, is there a contact list being retained so that we will automatically be contacted going forward?
Right now, everyone who has contacted me, I have put your contact information into a spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I have future meetings, it's much easier for me to actually pull down all the email addresses and send emails out. So if I have an email from you in the past, I saved your email somewhere. That way it's much easier to get word out for like the next community meeting as well.
Great. So email Fred if you would like to make sure you are on that list. Of the contact information we have for this meeting is just based on your sign name. So it really isn't a way for us to follow up with participants from this meeting unless Fred has your contact information beforehand. So highly encouraged to use his correct email. And you can get that from the webpage. Has the county completed another restoration project like this one? If so, how long ago? How is it holding up? And that is the last question.
All right, so for that, let me get out of. No, there's something I want to show because it won't take long. I just need to. There we go. Supplemental materials. So yes, there is another restoration that we've done that Nathan has worked on. It's out in Chantilly. It's called Flat Lake Branch Phase 1. And that one is, oh, sorry. Ow. All right, so that was on the wrong screen. But that one had a larger drainage area and was a slightly larger channel. And it's been in the ground for a few years. And as soon as I open up the right window, I'd love to show kind of how it progressed. So I'm going to move this over here. So this is kind of what Flat Lake Branch Phase 1 looked like beforehand. You know, it also had a broken concrete Fairweather crossing.
Hi.
Hello. Oh. Is everyone seeing my?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, I heard something for a second. Then also had raw vertical banks, and trees were getting undercut, and that's what it was like before construction. And so, fortunately, we finished it during construction, so everything was brown. But you can see, like, we have the sloping banks, and we spared trees to the greatest degree that we could. And this is another picture of a crossing that we built. And so we provide stability to the stream channel. And then like the first growing season, like the herbaceous material popped up very quickly to where it was actually hard to see the structures that we implemented. And crossfade as water's coming through. And then we get further, second growing season in June, you start to see all the woodies start to take off. And this was during an actual rainy day, so it had not so great lighting. But then like the third year, like the trees are starting to take over, the ones that we planted starting to take over and grow in. And so a few years after it doesn't even look like we've been there. And you got a nice stable stream that still has the sloping channels and it's not eroding. But I guess I just wanted to share that quick one.
Great. Well, we had a great set of questions from the participants, and that was the last one that I see in the chat box, Fred.
All right. I'll just like to thank everyone for taking the time and listening to the presentation. And I enjoy receiving feedback because ultimately I want to give the community something that they're proud of. So with that, I wish everyone a good night.
Thanks, Fred.